This plastic scraper is actually designed for kitchen floors, but very useful for what we want. Finding the latrine corner, you simply scrape out the corner and get all of the solid stuff out, mix it in with the shavings to make it dry enough to sweep up, and then we sweep it up with this, and once we've emptied the cage of all the solid debris, we can set about cleaning it. As I mentioned earlier, ferrets use one area as a latrine, and this is the area they've chosen in this cage. On the walls we've actually got dried feces, and it's important to make sure that they're removed properly. Left as they are, it's a breeding ground for bacteria, they attract flies, and create smell, so we need to clean all of that off. We've removed all the solid waste, and now we're going to spray disinfectant onto this, and the disinfectant will be left to stand for a few minutes, and we'll start working straight away on that feces. Now it's important to remember that not all disinfectants are suitable to be used for this purpose. This particular one is called a surface active disinfectant, and that is ideal. What you shouldn't use are any disinfectants that turn white when added to water. That means they are phenol based. Phenol is caustic and toxic to ferrets, so in other words it will burn them and it will poison them, so we mustn't use it at all. This is a plastic cage, but the same method can be used on a wooden cage, providing that you've actually treated the wood inside, preferably with paint or some kind of sealer. Otherwise, if you put too much liquid on, it will simply soak into the wood and will rot it. So there we have it, a nice clean cage. We'll fill that up, shavings in the bottom, some nice clean straw, put the animal back in, and that gives the animal a nice, clean, comfortable cage, and that's what every animal deserves. As more people discover the joys of keeping ferrets as pets, so more ferrets are actually kept in the household, and this is the ideal setup for keeping the ferrets within the house. Nice, airy cage, because of course it doesn't need protection from the heat or cold. We have a hammock, which allows the ferret to curl up on there and go to sleep in at night, whenever it wants to. We'll also play in there, jumping in and out. And at the bottom, we have a tray, which is lined with newspaper. That makes cleaning out very simple and creates very little mess within the house. And of course, we've got water fastened on the outside, and it's important to make sure that the animal always has access to fresh, clear water. Now you can see that this little chap here, not only does she run around, but she'll also use the ladder, which leads to the shelf, for climbing and for playing with. Generally, a good cage. Being a household pet, lots of people allow their ferret complete access to the homes, and so therefore the addition of a couple of litter trays in each of the rooms that the ferret uses will make sure that any poop and any urine doesn't go on your carpet. You can put cat litter into the litter tray if you wish, but I always feel that newspaper is much easier, as we mentioned with the cage, because of course it creates less mess. Another very important aspect to keeping ferrets, of course, is feeding. Food maketh the man, and of course maketh the ferret too. Ferrets in the wild are carnivores. Because they're carnivores, they'll eat all kinds of animals, things like rabbits, rats, mice, even slugs, earthworms and a few beetles. You may well be lucky enough to be able to obtain items like this, dead pigeons which perhaps a friend will shoot, or you might pick them up off the side of the road. If you do, that's no problem in feeding that, but open it up first and just check to make sure there are no obvious signs of illness. If it's warm weather, then don't pick up anything off the road unless it's very freshly killed and it's early in the morning, because botulism can set in very easily with dead animals. One of the things that people recently have latched onto are these. Now this is a day-old cockerel. Already dead when you buy them, and they're sold literally by the thousand at just a couple of pence each. Lots of people think that because they are a complete animal, then it is everything that the ferret needs. That is wrong in this case. The cockerels themselves, a day old, are fed on nothing else other than the egg, so therefore they contain a lot of the substance from the egg, including a substance that inhibits biotin. Biotin makes your hair grow, and so therefore if you inhibit that growth, then you get bald ferrets. So feeding a lot of these to your ferrets will cause that kind of problem. They're also very low in calcium, and that can exhibit hypercalcemia, which means that the ferret's bones just won't develop properly. And if they are fed to nursing Jills or pregnant Jills, then the youngsters will be totally deformed, unable to walk around normally. And perhaps the most insidious thing about these is that the texture of the down irritates the mucous membranes that line the throat, and will cause the throat to swell up from the inside, and that can cause your ferret to actually starve to death, even though you're giving it lots of food. If you must feed something like the day-olds, then don't feed them any more than once a week, and never ever feed them to kits or to nursing Joes. We're trying to obtain a complete balanced diet with all the food that we give to a ferret, and to look into that you need high protein. About 40% protein is what ferrets need. You need fat, you need carbohydrates, you need vitamins and minerals, etc. Now, one of the things that people don't consider is that a ferret's needs, as with any mammal, vary throughout the year. We have a system where our body can keep our temperature regulated. It's called homeostasis. And what happens then is the body uses energy to convert into heat to get that energy from the food. So in the winter we need to give more fats and carbohydrates, but if we continue that in the summer, we're going to actually get obese, in other words fat ferrets, and we don't want that. One of the things that people feed regularly to pet ferrets is this. It's called as pet mince. Now this is quite alright to feed in the winter, very high in fat, but in the summer of course we don't want to feed it that. This is frozen, that's how you buy it. If you're feeding frozen food, it's got to be properly defrosted, and really it ought to be cooked for about 15 minutes, really well cooked, and as soon as it's cool enough, served to the ferrets almost instantly. We all like to give our animals the occasional tidbit, and liver, such as this, is absolutely ideal for that. But if fed in excess, it can cause all kinds of problems to your ferrets. Only feed a small amount, once a week at the absolute most, and do not give it as a staple. Do not give it every single day. Perhaps the easiest way for us all to obtain meat for our ferrets is to buy tinned cat or dog food. Dog food, cat food, more or less the same, except that cat food is better for the ferrets for all kinds of reasons, better vitamins and a higher protein content. But a word of warning, if you're feeding these items to your ferret, then it will make the ferret's smell increase almost tenfold. So if you don't mind that, that's fine. But if you want to feed them on something nice and easy like this, but you don't want the smell, try feeding them on dry dog or cat food. The traditional method of feeding ferrets, and unfortunately one that some people still use today, is to give bread wetted down with milk, bread and milk, or milk sops. Now, I would argue that that should never ever be fed to ferrets. It is completely alien to their body, it upsets their digestive system, it will give them diarrhea, and it will not give them the balanced diet that they require. Milk, it could be argued, is good for the ferret because it's high in protein, it has fat, it has calcium, etc. But fed raw will always scour your ferret, give it diarrhea. One of the ways around that is to mix raw milk with a raw egg, whisk it together and cook it. Scrambled egg. Ferrets absolutely love it, does them the world of good, and has no side effects. Now, you may be lucky enough to live in a country where you can obtain some of this material. This is just one brand of complete ferret food. If you can get hold of this, this is the ideal way of feeding ferrets. There's a complete balanced diet in here, 40% of protein, which is very difficult to obtain otherwise. It will reduce the smell of your ferret, it will give them much firmer stools, and generally give you a very healthy ferret. So if you can obtain this for your ferret, I recommend that your ferret should be fed a complete diet such as that. Every year, as the days start to get longer and the nights shorter, the female will come into season. As she comes into season, or estrus, the female sex hormone, estrogen, will be switched on and will begin coursing around the Joe's body. Normally, in the wild, she would find a male very quickly, she will be mated, and the actual act of mating will induce ovulation, and that will switch off the estrogen. In captivity, of course, there may not be a male around, in which case she will stay in season for up to 6 or 7 months. All the time she's in season, estrogen is coursing around her body. That can cause all kinds of problems, and eventually will lead to the death of the female. May not be that year, will die from a form of cancer. So she needs that estrogen switching off. We can take her to the vets for an injection, and the injections will take her out of estrus, and of course she'll need that doing every year, every time she comes into estrus. But to me, the best method, certainly if you're keeping a lot of ferrets, is to have a male vasectomise. A normal male is called a hob, a vasectomised male is called a hoblet, and a castrated male is called a hobble. And you do not want a hobble to do this job. A hobble has no testes. Without the testes, he can't perform the sex act, and so that would be useless for us. Because, as I said earlier, it is the